Hi, I'm Dawn Sanders and I am coming to you from Sheffield in the north of England. I first want to start by thanking the influential women in literature who have given me this opportunity to promote myself and what I'm doing. Just a bit of background about myself. I am nearly 50 in a week's time, and I have just completed an MA, a Master's in Journalism, at Sheffield Hallam University. I've got a 20-year-old son who has complex needs and lives on the other side of town to me. I've got a background in international politics and activism, and I'm a socialist with a pagan perspective. This talk is going to be delivered very much on a very personal and forthright visually impaired perspective. So I'm going to start with the article that I'm loosely basing this talk on. It's called Sexability and the Invisible Veil. The invisible veil obviously being the veil of the barrier basically that shrouds us as visually impaired people, as people in the wider context with additional needs, as not being sexual beings, and that borders on obviously social ability. Everybody wants to be liked, we all want to be loved. It's human nature. And that's actually the first point of call when, anybody's looking to, say, for a partner or whatever. I mean, you have to be social material. So this is based on a lot of people's perspective. Another visually impaired person I interviewed for the piece basically raised the point about being alone in a crowd, kind of being sitting there and not being able to engage in the all-prevailing, overrated eye contact that people connect with usually. And so you're kind of sitting there really, and part of the woodwork, say, maybe on your own. And in my experience, I'm often part of the woodwork, and it's not until you stand up and you're no longer part of the woodwork, and all of a sudden everything is functional. Are you alright? Can you manage? Do you want to help to the bar, or do you need help? It's not like you get classic chat-up lines. That's very rare. In my experience, it's all pretty functional rather than taking an interest. And when it happens to me personally, don't know how to act. So another point that was raised in the article by an Adolf Radska of the Independent Living Institute in Sweden basically points out that people with additional needs are inherently seen as objects of care. So how could they possibly be sexy? Well, from a societal perspective, that's true, but it's also the way that the media, and of course the social pecking order, the class pecking order portrays people with additional needs. The presumption being that, you can't possibly feel sexy or want sex or desire, or even you're not even capable of it. That's, a very sweeping generalization. But the point being that is true. And I suppose in more Western countries, obviously things vary from culture to culture. And I've studied in Middle Eastern countries, it's very much the case that if you do have special needs, whatever, that you are kind of either looked after by your family, or you maybe luckily get paired up with somebody else who, say, is visually impaired or has the same type of needs. Very different cultural variations there. But it also starts at home when you're a kid, when you're growing up. Everybody has that situation when you're growing up. You learn about stuff in the playground and all the kind of sniggering that goes on. But when you, say for example, my son went to specialist school, and I had to bang away for about 2 or 3 years asking them, well, when do you start sex education? I knew for a fact that they really just danced all around it. I knew that, but then I kind of was testing them, well, when do you start sex education? 13. Well, my son by 11, 12, by the time he was 11, 12 years old, he had already started to change. His attitude was already started to get body hair. And he knew that he was changing. And I was on them and on them and on them about, at his school saying, well, you need to start it now because he's changing and he's going to start feeling different things. He's going to start feeling different things physically, and that was obviously going on. So that I finally got them by the time he was 14 to engage him in sex education and special needs, friendly, simplified videos, dummy dolls, etc. And that was all great. And going back to personal experiences, different situations, I have to say that it's pretty crap in terms of being perceived, how people, particularly of the opposite sex, perceive, say, a woman with a visible difference. I mean, my visual impairment is not the first among equals with me. It's very much an integral part of who I am, but I'm a woman and a mum first. But my visual impairment, I'm not ashamed of it, but it would be nice to live without it. I mean, I'm not one of these people that say, oh, I'm going to go out and be an overachiever because I'm visually impaired and need to prove that, visually impaired people can do this and do that, and turn tricks and all the rest of it. But I just get on with life, everyday life, as anybody else. I go to festivals, I go to parties, I love people, I love engaging socially, and I like to do different, more bohemian alternative things, like go to, festivals where there's a lot of different things going on, there's a lot of campaigning, there's a lot of different ideals, and a lot of people with a different mindset around, and I've raised my son in that kind of environment. But having said that, people are people. I mean, I had a situation where last summer I went to a festival that was kind of prided itself on being more alternative minded. Well, bullshit really, because I was sitting in a marquee one night, hanging out with this couple and just chatting, and a guy comes up to me and says, oh, I've been pacing up and down. I paced up and down about 8 times. I didn't realize you were blind. And I'm like, well, okay. And he sits down next to me and these people that I was talking to and gets my hand and says, oh, here's my face. And I'm like, jerk my hand away, because I'm not into that. I've never been into that. And I said, look, mate, if you want to relate to me how you would relate to anybody else, then do so. I'm not into that. And, if you want to... And I thought to myself, I don't need to know what you look like. I mean, if somebody else explains to me or I ask somebody else later, it's another thing. But you're not that special. Nobody is. None of us are. And that really... Anyway, me being more forthright, he just kind of got up and walked away. Another time, I believe it was about 18 months ago, I was waiting outside a building for a taxi. And I was just waiting there, and this guy... from halfway down this road, the streets in this country are much smaller, so from halfway down the road I heard somebody say, she's fucking blind! And I thought to myself, well, he's obviously talking about me, because how many visually impaired people can there actually be in this one little street? And so a taxi turns up, and this person, I'm assuming, who just said that, silently stood next to the taxi and opened the door, and I got in, and he closed it. He didn't say a word to me. And, to this day, I will never forget this scenario, because I just thought, well, obviously there was looking going on when I came out of this building. I don't know what transpired between him and another party, but somebody might have said, oh, there's this lass up there or something. And he obviously looked and said, oh, she's fucking blind. And, it's hard not to pick apart a situation when you are obviously the subject of it. And I'll never forget this situation. So when friends of mine say, oh, you can go online to, dating sites or whatever, like, well, no, you can't, because the minute somebody, claps eyes on me, it's like, oh my God, she's blind. It's and I get that kind of reaction, and I've gotten it much more often than I've been approached by somebody who's genuinely interested. Now, I'm not saying for a second that, people with additional needs don't have partners. Of course we do. I'm not saying that I don't know people that are happily married or happily have a partner, a long-time partner. Of course that happens. And with integration, better integration in schools and in society, I suppose, things are changing. Things are changing, but I think ridiculously slowly, because I'm still coming across these situations at 50 years old. I'm still coming across situations where I don't feel like people see me, the woman I am, and other women and other people in situations like women in wheelchairs. Like, men, of course, have this, I think, but I think I have found in my experience that women often are more accepting for, say, a male who has additional needs. I've seen couples where more often than not, a woman say has her full sight, hearing, can walk and has no additional needs. And the man is, say, in a wheelchair or, has a hearing impairment or, visual impairment, whatever. But generally, or I've seen people that are, obviously, say, with somebody might be in a wheelchair and somebody else is like, on their feet but visually impaired. And that's kind of nice to see because there's commonalities there. There is just the whole thing of not having to be perfectly pretty. And I think this is what it boils down to. But when you're constantly at the receiving end of these things, it does really kind of mess with your self-esteem in a way. It really, after years and years of it kind of makes you a bit of a jaded somebody. It kind of really impacts on your relationship with the opposite sex. I personally, at this point in my life, feel quite estranged to the opposite or even the same sex as I'm bisexual. Any level of social inequality is never going to be solved overnight, but the more people talk about it, and I hope by shedding some light on it, that it brings that out in the open, because there's still people who are quite taboo about sex anyway. But when you mix the whole idea of sex and people with special needs, it's like there's all kinds of taboos, abound. And there's the whole thing of people with additional needs who are feeling desperately sexual, going to sex workers, for example, to get the satisfaction they need as any other person needs it, male or female. And so you get like this kind of camaraderie between people who are with additional needs, who are often inherently demonized sexually, socially. There's a lot of, obviously, hate crime, a lot of sort of hate crime that still prevails in whatever society we're in. And then obviously sex workers are being the final, the actors of the oldest profession in the world. Both two demonized groups of people that kind of come together for, but basically because to meet each other's ends. So, in a nutshell, it's not something that's going to be solved overnight. It's not something that's going to be inevitably shoved under the carpet, because the attitudes are gradually changing. The media is now, luckily with social media, with Google, we have a lot more questioning minds out there. There's a lot more people self-educating, and that's not a bad thing. And I'm just hoping that this will open up and people realize that, whether you have additional needs, we can see your partner or not, whether you are able to hear somebody trying to chat you up or not, is irrelevant. The point is that we are all human, and we need to acknowledge that we all have human desires. We all want to be liked and loved. And that's all I've really got to say. Stick it in your pipe and smoke it. Think about it. Digest it. Whatever. It's there. It's out there. So anyway, I'm Dawn Sanders, and if you want to read the article Sexability and the Invisible Veil, the website is www.nowthenmagazine.com/Sheffield/issue-74/. Anyway, thanks again, and I'm Dawn Sanders.